Hi, I'm Lara Lillibridge, and welcome to Writing About That Which We Dare Not Speak. Let me just share my screen here. So, my name is Lara Lillibridge. My pronouns are she and they. And I want to start this class with permission to breathe. Some of these readings are dealing with assault or abuse and might be disturbing or triggering for some writers that are attending this class. And feel free to step away or mute the class if you need to. The nice thing about a slideshow is you can see when we've moved on and return. There's no judgment, so do what you need to do to take care of yourself, please. I am told some people like an agenda, so this is my little quick one for you. Who am I? Why are we here? And some ways to write about the unspeakable, metaphor, empty space, erasure, creating distance through structure. And you'll note that my slides are done in Comic Sans font, which is considered more readable by many people with dyslexia, including my son. So just want to be as accessible as possible. So nice to meet you. I'm Lara Lillibridge. I have an MFA from West Virginia Wesleyan College, the concentration in creative nonfiction. My first book is called Girlish, Growing Up in a Lesbian Home, which talked about abuse. It talked about underage sexuality. It talked about cutting. It talked about mental illness, family secrets, all sorts of things I thought I would never be able to write about. My second book, Mama, Mama, Only Mama, is about my single parenting years, which is a much happier book, but writing about children who are old enough to read is its own brand of terror. I was lucky enough to be the co-editor of the anthology, Feminine Rising, Voices of Power and Invisibility. And my next book is called The Truth About Unringing Phones, and it comes out in March 2024 with Unsolicited Press. And that book is about my father and covert sex abuse and all sorts of things. So first of all, why can we not speak about something? Protect ourselves, obviously. Protect other people. Fear of judgment. This was huge for me. I was totally fine with the idea of a reader somewhere on the West Coast that I'd never run into, but the idea of my neighbor reading my book absolutely terrified me. Fear of getting sued. Sometimes we blow this up out of proportion in our heads, but some people do have a legitimate reason to be afraid of this, and we will address that. And next, we might not remember every detail. We don't trust our memory. We're afraid that we won't be believed because we don't have enough concrete evidence. However, Audre Lorde, one of my absolute writing heroes, my favorite quote from her, "Your silence will not protect you." And this was my wallpaper on my laptop when I was writing Girlish. And just because we feel we cannot speak about something doesn't mean that we can't write about something or that we don't need to. Sometimes the things that are the hardest to write about are the things that we desperately need to find a way to write about. So let's start with metaphor. Metaphor is cool because we can write about our feelings and we don't have to go into the details. We can write just completely about how something felt in a new and novel way and not go into what happened at all. The benefit for the reader is that this allows people to enter your writing through their own eyes and their own experiences. And the woundings they've experienced may be entirely different from yours, but it allows them to connect with your writing. So it can be a very powerful tool creatively. So my first writing exercise for you is to think about your writing and make a list of every metaphor you use. Find your most common metaphors and lean in at the top of your page. Write the metaphor, then write everything you can think of regarding the metaphor. So for me, it was eye-opening to learn that my biggest, most common metaphor was about insects. And I actually don't like bugs at all. So I was actually kind of shocked to learn that. It wasn't what I thought about myself. But when I leaned in, it became really powerful for me. I'm going to read you a couple of examples from my own work. if you want to use this time to sort of work on this writing exercise, it's totally fine. You can also just screen grab this exercise and do it later. So I wrote this essay originally about how it felt to be used by someone who I really had feelings for and who just wanted friends with benefits from me. And this essay was very shameful for me to write. And I interspersed all of these things about dead flies with this personal essay. And the feedback I got from everyone who read it was that it did not work and I should cut the dead flies. And yet the dead flies to me were one of the most important parts of the essay. So I did the opposite. I cut the entire essay and left only the dead flies. Now, I think that I started this essay writing about being used or letting myself be used, but I saw a call for submissions from Luna that was looking for pieces on mental health. And I looked at my dead flies piece and I thought about my social anxiety. And at times in my life, it had just been completely overwhelming. And I was able to tweak the essay just a little and have it fit their call for submissions. And they did wind up publishing this in 2016. And it's called When You Stop Inviting People Over. And I'm going to stop sharing for this. When you stop inviting people over. The first time you step on a dead fly in your bare feet, the crackling snap disgusts you. You run to the bathroom, wash your foot with soap and water for 10 solid minutes, then coat your heel in hand sanitizer for good measure. The presence of mashed fly interior adhered to your foot's exterior makes you want to yak, puke, or vomit, depending on your sensibilities. A house infested by cluster flies is not filled with airborne insects. Rather, every morning you wake to find legions of dead and dying flies on the floor, window ledges, countertops, and inside the sinks. When you open the fridge, there will often be a dead carcass on one of the glass shelves. The ones that are only half dead spin in circles on their backs, creating an incessant buzz you can't ignore. If you try to dispose of them with a broom instead of a vacuum cleaner, the flies that are still slightly alive, say 60-40 on the living dying scale, will rise up from the dustpan and buzz irritatingly around your face. Cluster flies appear inside homes in autumn, often in large numbers, crawling out of the cracks and crevices to buzz around sunny windows. They're looking for a place to spend the winter, like retirees driving their RVs to Florida. In the spring, they will leave to lay their eggs in the soil outside. After a few months of living with flies, the dust canister of your vacuum cleaner is coated in dark gray goo. When you empty it, you have to find something to scrape the fly guts off the inside. There's a distinctive smell that is slightly sweet and more than slightly nauseating. You count the fly bodies as if knowing the number of carcasses you vacuum will convince someone it really is as bad as you say it is. 57 in the bathtub, 13 on the counter. But when you try to count the pile in front of the sliding glass door, you lose track somewhere past 50. You stop inviting people over. You keep the curtains shut because sunlight will incite them to buzz and knock against the windows. You start vacuuming every morning, even before you have coffee. You, who always bought a dog that matched the carpet so you could avoid vacuuming as long as possible. After a few months, you use your finger to flick a fly off the counter and have to remind yourself that it's possibly a good idea to wash your hands. When you squash flies with your bare feet, you kind of like the crisp, fractured popcorn kernel feel, and you're just glad the incessant buzz is over. You remove the dead carcass by wiping your heel across the top of your other foot and go about your business. It's not something to be proud of, but you've become used to it over time. And then one day, all the flies disappear to lay their eggs outside somewhere. You no longer have to vacuum up their carcasses, and they no longer crunch under your feet when you get up in the middle of the night to get a drink of water. You tell yourself that before they return next fall, you'll tend to the house, find an exterminator, research pesticides, but after a few weeks, you start to forget. You put it off. You tell yourself, it wasn't that bad. And I'm sure it possibly won't be that bad again this year. And another year passes and the cycle repeats itself. and a teacher tells you your metaphor doesn't work, but you are sure it will have meaning for someone. So another essay I'm going to share, and I'm not going to share the whole thing on this. I just want to read a couple little bits. It's called A Justifiable, Unjustified Fear of Spiders. And it starts, covert incest is a form of emotional abuse in which the relationship between a parent and child is inappropriately sexualized without actual sexual contact. Wikipedia. Note, Wikipedia is not considered a reliable source for scholarly articles. For as long as I can remember, I've been afraid of spiders. Tricky things, they seem to be made not of legs but hands. My fear is not based on a possible bite. A spider has only bitten me once for as long that I can, a spider has bitten me only once that I can remember. The fear of spiders has to do with their ability to jump and the feel of their hand-like feet scurrying down my legs, back, or arms. Small, fluttering finger legs running across my skin. The possibility of a spider caught in my hair. The idea at night that they could descend into my half-open, slumbering mouth and I could swallow them and not even know it. So this to me is about covert sex abuse, specifically about how it would feel when my father would come into my room and stand there and watch me get dressed when I was completely naked. And to me, the feel of a spider scurrying was the way that his eyes felt on me. And this essay, I was lucky enough to get published in 13 Ways magazine, and it will be included in my upcoming book about my father. So those are just two kind of interesting ways, at least I hope you think they're interesting, about how you can write about an experience just using metaphor. And again, whatever metaphor resonates for you. Most people probably don't choose insects. So the next craft element we're going to talk about is the use of empty space or writing around the story. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is called The Body by Jenny Boully. And if you've taken a class with me, you know I am nuts about this book. But what is interesting about it, it's short, 75 pages, and in it, she is writing about a love affair, a failed love affair, but she never tells you the story. Instead, she only gives you the footnotes at the bottom of the page, and she has deleted the text of the story. And what she said in an online interview was that she hopes that the reader takes away the story of a failed love affair, but I also hope that they take away whatever story they constructed, the story they read between the lines. That is, I hope they take away faith in something living in the in-between. And for me, what happened was I filled in the empty space with my own memories and my own experiences. And in that way, this book became incredibly personal to me. And that's why I am so nuts about it. This is what it looks like, okay? Large amounts of blank page with just footnotes at the bottom. And I'm just going to read this first one here, the first two on the first page. 1, it was the particular feel of him that made me want to go back. Everything that is said underneath, where, if it does matter, to acknowledge it is to let on to your embarrassment. That I love you makes me want to run and hide. 2, it is not the story I know or the story you tell me that matters. It is what I already know, what I don't want to hear you say. Let it exist this way, concealed. Let me always be embarrassed, knowing that you know that I know, but pretend not to know. And it goes on with, varying amounts of white space. And she could have written this just as a list, similar to Maggie Nelson in her book, Bluets, which is just a numbered list of different things, different reflections, different thoughts, feelings, and memories. But the empty space makes you slow down. Your eye has to drag down that page to find the text again. And that small break makes you sort of contemplate the words a little bit more. Plus, to look at it, it's visually interesting, at least to me. And it made me really interested to see what she was writing about. Next, I want to talk about The Chronology of Water by Lidia Yuknavitch, who is one of my favorite writers of all time. And she's writing about being sexually abused by her father, but she never talks about what happens. Instead, well, I'll just read it to you. So she ends the narrative, which is about the time when she was very sick and was home alone with her father. And she says, because there are times when a soul has to leave a body that are not death. Some people know this like a hymn. I knew she, my body, was still there, but I left her lifeless in the arms of a father. I went into a white. Inside the white, there were sunflowers and lapis-colored glass and deep aqua pools. There were beautiful rocks everywhere, but you had to find them. Small and exquisite journeys that took all day. Like in a very good dream. Inside the white, too, were stories, as if written on the walls or floors of sky of the white. The words, you could see them, reach out and touch them, just like the rocks. You could pick up rocks or words and carry them. Sometimes the word rocks sang. After a while, I believed in them more than my own life. I thought it would be possible, even beautiful, to die. So in this, she's talking about disassociation, right? She's talking about where she went during this time of abuse. And at the back of the book is an interview with Lidia Yuknavitch. And she said that, first of all, she didn't want her book to become an incest memoir, that to her it was much larger than that. And I agree. And then also she wanted the reader to be able to enter the story through their own wounds. And she didn't want it to be so specific to her that they couldn't relate to it. And for me, it was, incredibly powerful, obviously, or I wouldn't share it. Next, this is a piece in Brevity, and this is about sexual assault. And if you don't know Brevity Magazine, all of their essays are 750 words or less, and they're all nonfiction. It's one of my favorite ways to start writing every day is to just open up Brevity online and read an essay, and it kind of gets me thinking. So this is called Thereafter, a Cleansing Spell by Melissa Gronow. Use this spell in the aftermath of an assault on the body for physical healing and survivor's justice. Be patient, as this process is ritualistic in nature and therefore time-consuming. Use the 2 days you call in sick to complete it. You will need the following supplies: 5-gallon bucket with lid, 2 gallons of bleach, long-handled wooden spoon, loofah, new, chopped wood, paper scraps, outdoor fire pit, sealable plastic bags, shipping box. When you begin, your body will be naked, bloodied, bruised. Trust yourself to look in the mirror. Allow your hands to trace the welts on your lower back and hips, where a man you invited into your home after a date pinned you down. The friction burn on your right cheekbone stings. Be tender. Be gentle. Do not rush. Whisper incantations that the light within you still shines. Starlight, star bright. In a 5-gallon bucket, mix 1 part bleach and 2 parts water until it's half full. Take the dress you were wearing, the dark blue one with the polka dot skirt and yellow tie back, and submerge it into the bucket using a long-handled wooden spoon. Stir a few times, then cover the bucket with the lid. Strip the sheets off your bed, pulling the corners into the center to trap and cover any bodily stains left behind. Add the pillowcases and the washcloth and the towel he used and anything else his bare body may have touched. Roll everything into a loose ball, stuff it into the bleach bucket, stir and cover. Light sandal incense. Fill a bathtub with steaming water and sink in low until the waterline hovers at your chin. Bend your knees and place your feet flat on the bottom of the tub. Take a new loofah, coat it with rose water, and scrub your skin raw. When you're done, throw the loofah away. Submerge your body entirely to rinse. Conjure the mental imagery of broken chain links, assertive speech, definitive anger. Blow out the candle, inhale the smoke from the extinguished flame. Repeat the following incantation 3 times. Sam Antal Balor Ho Pe Rit. Once you've dressed in light, baggy clothing, drag your mattress to the curb and slash it with a knife as you ponder the universe in silence. The mattress is cursed now, and you don't want to send that kind of energy into someone else's home. Watch through the curtained window on trash collection day as the mattress is hoisted into the back of the truck and crushed, shredded, destroyed. Wish I may, wish I might. Back inside, pour the bleach bucket into the bathtub and run hot water on full blast and full heat over the whitened dress and sheets until steam coats the walls and billows out under the closed bathroom door. The mix of steam and bleach fumes may make you feel like you're going blind or you're choking. It's necessary to lift the lingering force on your covered eyes, the phantom hands, and your restricted throat. Wring out the fabric until it no longer drips and return it to the empty bucket. Dump the contents in the yard and leave them lying in the sun until completely dried. Check for moisture after a few hours and flip over if necessary. Pile chopped wood into the fire pit with paper scraps crumpled into a loose ball. Junk mail and old bank statements work best. Between the layers of wood. Add his 2 self-published novels to the stack, ignite them, and coax the fire until the flames rise and crackle. Have the wish I wish tonight. At dusk, toss the dress and the sheets onto the fire and watch it roar. Feel the heat on your face, feel mesmerized by the flames as they taunt, lick, and finally devour the fabric, his books. Send them transformed into the universe and whisper the sacred utterance, as I will, so mote it be. Let the fire burn out on its own overnight and wait for the ashes to cool. Scoop ash into clear plastic bags and seal them closed. Place the bags in a box and mail it to his wife with a note that reads simply, ask your husband. So what she does in this that I find so exciting as a writer is that she doesn't ever tell us about the assault, right? It's just about the aftermath and how she got herself through it. Did she actually perform this ritual? Is this what she really did following the assault? Or is this something that she wished she could have done? We don't know, and it doesn't matter. But what she does is she gives us the feelings so poignantly and so strongly. It's, to me, incredibly moving. But she never talks about the details. She never names him. And in that way, she's keeping herself safe. Moving on. Sharing my screen again. I want to write, but I don't trust my memory, or everything is hazy, or I've forgotten a lot. This is actually really common because in trauma, a lot of things go fuzzy. That is a very common trauma response. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that you can't write about it. And one way that is a really successful way is to just own the fact that you don't remember. And for example, this is from an essay that I wrote that's going to be in my book about my father coming out next year. I'll come back to the writing exercise. There was something weird that happened in a bathtub with my father when I was small. I remember him asking, "Where's the penis?" I don't remember anything else. Perhaps the question was only an anatomy lesson. Perhaps I remember nothing else because nothing followed. I worry that if I try to remember too hard, I will fill in details with my imagination and no longer know what is true. Now, this is a blog post as an example of a writing exercise from Alexandre's blog from back in 2011. And in it, she plays with what she doesn't remember from childhood. And she writes, I don't remember living in Queens, New York. I was 5, and though I get flashes of memories that walk me through that year, mostly I don't remember. What I do remember is the feel of the brick building that held my kindergarten class, where I got lost because I couldn't understand the teacher's instructions, since Spanish was what I learned at home. And instead of the playground, I was in the dark, cold hallway with my backpack and lunchbox, alone. I remember being afraid. I must have cried, but that I don't remember. I'm going to skip ahead just for time. So the last paragraph. I remember my father's fear when he got mugged. I don't remember how or when or why, except that I vaguely remember a story of him being taken by 4 men, or was it 3, and driven around, stripped of his wallet, money, and courage, only to be deposited back somewhere near our apartment, alive. He must have prayed, but I don't remember him saying if he did. If he were alive, I'd ask him, but I don't know that he'd remember. So this to me is just a very simple, straightforward way of dealing with what you don't remember. And a good writing exercise to get started on this kind of an essay is to start by writing I remember 4 times on your page, and then filling them in. I remember, I remember, I remember, I remember. You can do more than 4. I mean, I certainly have filled up pages of I remember. But then thinking about the same incident or the same time period, write about what you don't remember. And again, do it again, just plain and simple. I don't remember, I don't remember, I don't remember. And then see if any of those items on the list speak to each other, and see if there's a way to combine them. Next, I want to talk about erasure and redaction. And this is something that I personally am really fond of, possibly because I used to be a legal secretary, and one of my jobs was to go through documents for discovery and have these little stickers that say redacted and stick them on redacted, redacted, redacted before it was given over to the other counsel. So I'm, again, for time consideration, not going to read this whole thing, but this was an essay I wrote called Eyedropper of a Woman, which was published in Doors Ajar in fall of 2016. A glass of water, 2 eyedroppers. I drip blue with my left hand, red with my right. The colors swirl into violet. So many conversations in my head. You can't write that. You have children. Even if they don't read it, their friends might. Do you really want your teenage son's friends to know that you redacted at 13? Are you sure you want your children to know redacted about your mother? What will the mothers of the friends at school think when they read your memoir? Write your shame, write your deepest secrets. Don't try and look good on the page. The narrator must be a complicated character. If you aren't crying when you write, then you are writing the wrong things. I feel a moral obligation to caution you about writing about sex. Once you put it out there, you can never take it back. Write in metaphor. You need to learn the value of obscurity. I can't separate the red dye from the blue, no matter how much I want to fit in properly. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you know, the idea of redacted, and at the time, those were things that I thought I couldn't speak about. The redacted at 13 was oh my God, I could never write that I redacted at 13. But you know what, I did and I lived. But this essay was also published as it was without those details. So I want to talk about one line in here where I say, you know, only write in metaphor. Please, please don't think I'm saying that in this class. I'm trying to give you different ways to approach the material, but they are not the only ways to approach the material. Okay, back to the screen share. So there's something called blackout poetry, which is really common, where someone will take a text of another person's work or a magazine article or a newspaper article, and they will black things out until what is left creates a poem for them, which is cool, but not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is writing your own truth, your own unspeakable truth, and then blacking out everything that is too much to talk about, too much to write about, to share with the world. So this is actually not a poem, but it shows you really what I'm talking about. This is a redacted thing about unidentified flying objects, various unidentified objects, silent light moving. The light was a satellite, not an aircraft. The light was subsequently identified as at least one aircraft. One was a stationary blinking light. The 2 other moving lights crossed paths. Now, as I said, this is not actually intended as a piece of creative nonfiction or creative fiction or poetry, but to me, it actually reads sort of in an interesting poetic way. So writing exercise, write the forbidden story, write every detail you can think of, write everything that you cannot say that you don't want anyone to know. print it out, and then use a Sharpie or marker, whatever you have, to black out everything that is a revealing detail. Some people cut it out with scissors. As I said, I used labels that said redacted, whatever it is that appeals to you, and see what's left. Now, from there, you can scan it and make it as a blacked out essay, which could be really fun. I've never done it, but it's something I want to do. Or you can just delete out those sentences and see what's left. And if you do print it out and scan it and upload it, zoom in really close and make sure that you really can't read those things that you've blacked out, because if you're trying to protect yourself, make sure you do a good job. Next is creating distance and emotional safety through structure. And this is where you tap into the power of owning the story and telling it your way. And the way that you tell the story is not the way that anyone else might tell the story, and it doesn't have to be. And I am here as proof that you can write the story your own way, and someone out there will want to publish it, no matter if it's about stepping on dead flies, okay? So in Girlish, my first book, the only way that I could find the distance I needed from the story was to write it third person. And this is how it starts. Picture a scrawny little girl with shoulder blades that stick out like chicken wings, an outie belly button, and detached earlobes. She has big brown eyes and messy hair. When stepmother combs girl's hair with a fine-toothed men's comb, it bites into her scalp and makes her cry. So, when I took this risk of not only writing it third person, but making the me character just called Girl, I knew it was a huge risk, and I knew it was the only way I could tell my story. And, Skyforce Publishing liked it and published it as it was. Some readers hate it. Some readers really, have responded negatively, but I knew it was the only way I could tell my story because I needed that distance. My Body is a Book of Rules. Okay, this is another one of my pet favorite books of all time. And in it, Elissa Washuta writes about mental illness, her Indian identity, and being raped as a virgin. And she writes about it in different ways. She has lyrical, beautiful essays, and then she has diary entries, and then she has dun, 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 an SVU script, yes, as in Law and Order Special Victims Unit. And in it, she writes about watching Law and Order over and over again. And she said in her book, I sought to watch until everything in my head, every doubt, every piece of fuzz obscuring some memory would be replaced by Olivia's voice telling me that I was so, so strong. 3 years after the rape, I took all those scratches from my pink notebook, typed them into neat lines, and plugged them into a grid that made sense to me, with lines from the show on one side, pinned up against my true story on the other. And she has bad cop, and these lines are obviously not real, but the other side is her real story of what happened when she went to the police after she had been raped. Moving forward, this is a wonderful second person essay by Kim Adrian that first appeared in the Gettysburg Review. And in it, she is writing a questionnaire for her deceased grandfather, who was, when we talk about inherited trauma, a huge presence in her life, even though she'd never met him. And she starts with asking very simple questions. Is it true that you were born and raised in the port city of Gothenburg, Sweden? Well, why did you run away? But then she goes into true or false. You sexually molested all 4 of your daughters. True or false. You often beat your wife when you were drunk. And in this, which is similar to the SVU script, the writer is taking control. The writer is asking the questions. The writer is presenting the information and is not feeling pushed around, right? That the writer is reclaiming their power and their voice, and they are demanding answers, or they're presenting information in a way that feels completely legitimate to them, and they are not giving the reader what is expected. Now, I want to talk a little bit about safety, because safety in terms of lawsuits is a very legitimate concern. And this is by Gwen Nijkamp. It's called I Google My Assailant, a found essay with commentary. And as it says, she Googles her assailant and comments about what she found. Yeah, who knew, right? And this is in the Black Warrior Review's most recent literary magazine. And I'm not going to read it again. I don't have time, but she has this footnote. For the purpose of this essay, let's pretend my assailant is his legal name. And here I have paraphrased every search result, changed every name, and tweaked website designs. Let me make this clear. This is not to protect my assailant. This is to protect myself. I want to avoid plagiarism, copyright infringement, and defamation lawsuits. I don't have the energy or financial resources to fight. But I have not compromised the integrity or substance of my assailant's internet presence. And she does write more about protecting herself in the way that she is writing this. And I like it because it's very resonant to me that in this day and age, in the age of internet trolls, in the age of people that are, lawsuit happy, sometimes we do have to make people anonymous that don't deserve to be anonymous. And this to me was just so much righteous anger. I loved it. And that brings me to the Authors Guild. There are many different legal resources, but this is a really inexpensive one for writers. If you join the Authors Guild, which is like a professional association for writers, you can download a free legal handbook, and you can actually connect with an experienced lawyer that knows about writing. Membership, you have to join the Authors Guild. It ranges from $35 a year to I think $150, depending on like your particular circumstance. But if you are really if you're really worried about getting sued, to me, it's well worth it. It's worth the peace of mind. Now, the last thing in these last few minutes I want to talk about is experimenting with bravery, because you just might surprise yourself. I surprised myself. All the things I thought I could never write about, guess what? I wrote about. And then the things left over that I still could never write about, I just wrote about. And that's a book that I'm shopping right now. You're like, yeah, Lara, but no, I've written family secrets. I've written about queer sex, regular sex, having sex with married people, lying. Lying was really hard for me. Diarrhea. Diarrhea was really hard to write about, but I did it only once, but I did it. And I lived. And the way that I did it was first doing tests. It's starting with simple conversations. When someone would ask, what are you writing about? I would say, oh, my master's thesis is about being named for Dr. Zhivago's other woman and then becoming the other woman in real life. That was it, that one sentence, which terrified me to say, but it was true. And I did have one person that never replied to my email after that. But most people responded with kindness. They said, oh, my sister was in that position, or my best friend, or I knew someone, or I myself. And I got compassion, not judgment. And next thing, when I started writing my book about sex and gender and shame that I'm shopping now, was I tested it at a story slam. You don't read, but I told a story about sex and shame that I was really terrified, and I lived. And during my MFA experience, the first essay I wrote that was incredibly naked about queer sex, I wouldn't hand out paper copies to my workshop because I didn't want anyone to keep, any kind of proof of what I had said. But I read it to them and I cried, and they were so nice to me. And it was just such a wonderful, wonderful experience. Now, I didn't write again about queer sex in that way for, I think, 8 years. Okay. It's not that it made me brave instantly. But then when I did write about it, I let someone read my work, someone who I really adored, but was really terrified of their response. And they were like, oh, I totally love this. I relate to this. Even though she was a cis het, straight married woman, she was like, I totally love this. And I think the world needs this. So sometimes that bravery can pay off. For me, it has so far, but my life's not over yet. So As I did this, I had a mantra that I would say to myself every night. I would say, blank wrote their truth and lived. And I would just over and over. And when I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, terrified that I wouldn't live if I wrote these stories, and I would say, Lidia Yuknavitch wrote her truth and lived. Lynn Hall wrote her truth and lived. And I would name all these writers that came before me. And I would say the Winnie the Pooh quote, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. So you can develop your own mantra. These were just the ones that I used. Lastly, because this is a recorded class, we can't have questions, but you can find me on Twitter at only_mama or email me at lara.lillibridge@gmail. Mention this class in the subject line, though, so that I can have some idea who you are. But I would love to continue the conversation or answer more specific questions that you have. So we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming to my class, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.